Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast show powered by citiesabc.com, businessabc.net, wisdomia.ai and sportsabc.org. And we are here continuing profiling fantastic personalities of business and technology, the thinkers and the changers that are making, I would say, a better narrative for the world that we live in. And especially nowadays, it's more important than ever. So today I'm quite excited to profile in our series someone that I've been actually studying for a while, and that was I would say, quite excited because it touches, I would say, almost all my passions, but it mixes in a lot of different ways. So I welcome to our series Anders Indset, and Anders is a personality that you cannot put in a box, let's put it that way, because he is a philosopher, a best-selling author, a deep tech investor, and as well a technologist. And as well as a philosopher and a best-selling author, he's been actually researching a lot of things we are right now touching that actually are becoming more and more important, especially as we get into the realms of AI. So Anders is from Norway, is based in Germany, and some of his best-selling Spiegel bestseller books include The Quantum Economy, Saving the Mensch with Humanistic Capitalism, 2020, Wild Knowledge, How to Think the Revolution, 2017, and Das Enthusiast Denken, 2021, and Philosophy at Work, 2022. And his latest book, The Viking Code, The Art and Science of Norwegian Success, it was launched in 2024, and he has a new upcoming book in January 2025. So he's as well a prolific personality. So outside of his work as a writer and thought leader and as well philosopher, he is as well the founder and CEO of Njordis Group, a venture capital and advisory firm established in 2022 with focus on helping deep tech companies scale. Njordis invests in seed to venture stage technology business to deliver positive progress for humanity and connect them with decision makers, venture capitalists, and private equity firms. He is the initiator of numerous projects such as the Quantum Economy Alliance, and as well the founding partner and investor at the Global Institute of Leadership and Technology, GILT, that delivers education programs for business and individuals promoting collaboration, dialogue, and co-creation to advance leadership in the modern world. And just we could go for a lot of different things. I want just to highlight as well the work where he serves as senior advisor and investor as Terra Quantum AG, a Swiss deep tech company that is a leader in quantum technologies, driving innovation in what is called the second quantum revolution. So there's a lot of more things I could go. I will put the bio here, but I want to welcome to our series, Anders. I'm quite excited, and as well trying to go through all the areas of your personality.
Dinis, thank you so much for having me on. Pleasure to be with you.
So I think you are definitely someone we cannot put in a box, and it has a lot of different areas. And I would say someone that is a venture capitalist, you have to be a thinker, but a philosopher and an author and a technologist is things that not a lot of people, and there's a couple of fantastic exceptions, but you are one of them. So I would like to, first of all, from Norway to the world, and as well some of the things you've been doing, if you could give me a bit of your background, but starting a bit for the childhood. I always like to go one moment, at least in childhood. Of course, depends on what you want to go, that made who you are, or at least if you would imagine where you are right now when you were a child.
Yeah, I grew up in a pretty small town in Norway, and I think I was about 12 years old when I told my dad I will never work for someone. I always wanted to create my own things, and I realized that I was very interested in building various things, and obviously what drove me back then is what I've returned back to with philosophy, and my recent work is the strive towards new experiencing. This is to learn. The experience to learn, I think, is one of the most important things that we kind of sort of lose when we get into that reactionism of the current society. We create a social media where we have thumbs up, thumbs down, and instant reaction leads to gratification, and it's an optimization society. We have maximized the art of being right. It's your opinion, my opinion, very binary way of thinking. I never looked at the world as static or as binary. I always looked at it now in later years. I define this as the dynamism, the dynamism of life, that there is no balance. There is a strive towards what I call dynamic equilibrium. But even in my childhood, it seemed that I was driven by that curiosity towards progress and towards new experiences. And it always gave me something back when I realized that I had learned something. So learning, I think, has been a very core pillar throughout my childhood. I did a lot of sport. I was a professional athlete and practiced various sports in growing up in Norway. So a very active youth that I lived. I was curious, reading books, but I also was very interested in various types of sports. So we lived that typical Norwegian life: put on your clothes, get outside, be active. A lot of, taking initiatives and having a sense of agency. So I grew up in a very stable family, and eventually I moved to the US, graduated there from high school, and moved back to Norway and started to study marketing, actually. And I took a year off, a pause in that studies, to go to Germany because I had an offer from Germany to play Olympic or team handball. And I wanted to learn the German language and read the German philosophy, and in the original sense, like the nuances of the language, the beauty of the things that we cannot translate. So it led me to some of these thinkers that we have gotten very familiar with through the study of the philosophical achievements that a lot of the German-speaking audience or German writers have contributed to various aspects of philosophy. And I always, next to my sport career, I was very early interested in building companies, and I considered myself a hardcore capitalist. I wanted to have the goals and to arrive and to move on and just to try for more, which was at the end a very exhausting journey because I had left that very aspect of experience, which then made me return and sell off my company and start to write and think and experience that progress that I had in my childhood. Returning back to the very foundation of what I think is important to live an active life, the learning part of being a human being or a mensch. So that was like a fast walk through my youth and my moving to Germany and tapping into philosophy and baking in some parts of the career into your answer of that question. I hope that gives you a good entrance starting point, Dinis.
No, fantastic. And it's really quite impressive how you kept, first of all, having a total control of your life and career, but as well pushing the boundaries between the thinking part and the business and the technologies part. So I want to just, during the point of you build your work as a philosopher, before we go deep into your books and different parts you did, how did you juggle these different parts? Because normally people try, I know Germany is quite an exception because most of the people in business are PhDs, at least when you go deeper on your career. But the German economy is a lot of innuendos, let's put it that way. But how did you manage this kind of balance between the researcher, the philosopher, the technologist, and the business part? Because I think it's one of the things that probably a lot of people listening to us.
Sure. It's a very important question, and I never studied, actually. So I didn't have that, I say, the advantage of having a PhD or having that expertise that gives you credibility. But I also had the advantage of not carrying the load of having a category of being an expert in one particular field. I think today we live in an era of generalists. We have almost instant and free access to infinite knowledge. And what we return to today is basically the art of thinking. And I think that philosophy to me is a thinking practice. So if you are a thinker in your time, it means that you have a different view on some of these concepts, and you can observe the world and then think about how you can apply that to what we call physical reality. So to me, my thoughts are important to bring to life. So it wasn't so much of a balanced struggle. It was more to me to remove the things that I didn't want to do. So I had a path in my life where to me, it was very important to have goals and visions and have that finitude. But you said it at the beginning, it's hard to put me in a box. And this was very important to me to not have a set static category, because I think that is, and you see that today with AI, if you have something that is given, if you think that you are a learned practitioner of some art, that you have mastered some art, you are not, you're not finished, but you're done. You're out, you're overnight, you can be replaced by people that attack with technology. So to me, it was always important to have that strive towards dynamic equilibrium or that progress path. So it became much in recent years, it become clear to me that I was always removing things that was not part of my journey. Without comparison, how Michelangelo kind of sort of put out of stone and the statue of David, and the statue of David was created because everything was removed that was not a part of David. So it was kind of sort of the art in the making. And I look at life for every individual kind of like that. It's more of an Eastern way of thinking at it, that the journey is what makes life worth living, and what you detach yourself from or remove that is not a part of who you want to become, that is a part of your journey. So to me, that was never, I mean, obviously, if you have a lot of things going on, you have, challenges and time management and all of that, but it wasn't a struggle to try to balance out something, because to me, it was never important to achieve some kind of static balance.
And this opens a lot of questions, a lot of dimensions. So I want to touch a bit. So as a philosopher, and I know that this is a word very important for you and for your books and as a writer, so a bit of the process of writing. Like you said, you don't have a conventional education, and you have as well been juggling with a lot of different things. So how did you start writing, and how you build the body of work that you have as a writer and as well as a philosopher? And as well, you have a couple of concepts that I want to touch, but I would like more of the storytelling around that first.
Yeah, to me, and I've grown to cherish that, struggle where you sit down and you have nothing. So to me, writing is thinking. It's where I can deeply sort out my thoughts, and I can go back and revert. And a lot of the things that I write and think about do not manifest themselves in the time of the writing. I often return back to it at a much later stage. I have a lot of things, articles and thoughts that I build and bake on and work on. So I think it is with everything else in life. First of all, you have to show up, right? It's not like there are days where you could, practice an art and you can do something extraordinary and you have some kind of flow state, or you are energetic and things are just clicking for you. But I think the mastery of an art, or to have progress, not only to master, but to even have progress, comes from discipline to show up. So, if you put yourself and you want to write, then you don't think about writing a book, you start to write. And sometimes that is, something that could go pretty well, quickly, because you have access to research and you thought about what you want to say. Other times, like one of the books that I wrote, I ended up deleting the complete second part of the book after I had written it, and deleted all the sources and everything and started from scratch, because I was moving things around and I was not happy at all. And that frustration led to a very dynamic second start of the second part of the book, which obviously delayed the process by almost a year, but it was like that learning path of the writing in itself. So I think it's very important, regardless of things that you want to do or things that you like, there also has to be some structural part that you just show up and do it. I think, progress comes from doing and putting in an intrinsically motivated effort, but it also comes from showing up and giving your best, even if there are times of struggle. You sit down and you write for 2 hours. Sometimes, it's not productive, but it's a part of the process. And I think that's very important. And I try to put in time every day to write, because as I said in the beginning, to me, writing is thinking.
So let's make a parallel, and let's start the first parallel. And the first question is, so tell us about, first of all, the writing part. So you wrote, like I mentioned, 5 big books that have been having quite a lot of attention. Let's probably start with the quantum economy, and then probably touching with the last one, or the last 2, because we have one in 2024 and another in 2025, but a bit of the narrative around your writing career.
Yeah. No, I started to write a very simple business book, kind of like a startup, how to do business, because that was very close to me. I started to realize that a lot of the philosophical questions that I've been thinking about was all of a sudden on the tables of CEOs or leaders around the world, that a lot of these philosophical questions had practical implication for businesses. So that was, to me, an initial point where I had sold my company and I started to think about, the relationship between business and philosophy. And therefore I said, then I'm a business philosopher. Let's figure out what that is, and to unify those 2 disciplines. And then I wrote the quantum economy, as you mentioned. And the quantum economy, when I wrote it, was basically an outlook to where we are on AI today. It was written back in 2018 in German. And it made a foreshadow on how we will come to a point where science and philosophy get into some kind of dynamic dance where noble lecturers all of a sudden will come out of corporates and not out of academia, because the money will be with the exponential tech companies, and they will have the talents, and they will build the research centers that you usually used to have in academia, where you produce a lot of papers. So from starting point 100 years ago, the theoretical foundation of quantum theory, our modern physics, that now has become a practicality where we are looking at implications of these theory or this foundation of physics, how that can be applied to real life scenarios or to business. So it was an outlook on quantum technology. It was a play between philosophy and science. It wasn't very deep in a scientific sense because I'm not a physicist. I had the privilege to work with some of the greatest physicists over the past years, but it was to me just an entrance point prior to, the ChatGPT moment and the rise of AI, for me to foreshadow and to look at, what can be the implications of such a development. I envisioned a 10-year period from 2020 to 2030 where we would have that, exponential progress in these technologies. Obviously, I did not foresee a pandemic. I did not see the wars coming. And also, I did not see the speed of change, which is always something when you put out radical theses, in the time of writing or speaking, people find them radical. In the retrospect, you were too conservative. So I did not go bold enough on that prediction, but basically I envisioned kind of sort of the society that we have today during the 2020s until 2030. And that was that book. So it was a terminology talking about quantum back in 2018 in mainstream media and in business was not, very common. And relating that to economy was obviously something that scientists and physicists did not fancy. And therefore, the book got a lot of attention around that topic. And then with the subtitle, in the English subtitle, it says humanistic capitalism, which is not precise. I have later returned to that word using humanistic, but what I mean is a humane capitalism that has some kind of component of a human being, a mensch, an agent that has some kind of conscious experience that is distinguishable from technology. So I think if I would rephrase the subtitle, it would be to save the mensch, what it means to be a human being, by applying a humane capitalism, where the core of capitalism is not about optimizing for the sake of optimization, but to have that essence of what kind of future is it worth striving for our species? What remains of us once we then reach some kind of artificial general intelligence or move towards some kind of technical singularity? So that book was technical in the sense of introducing quantum in terms to the mainstream, but also not very deep in terms of science when it comes to having clear scientific model and math baked into those thoughts and reflections. So they had that philosophical component to them, which is obviously back in 2018 a challenge, but we see it more and more today, how scientists also move into the philosophical challenges and vice versa. So yeah, I think it was a pretty good futuristic outlook on where technology was heading. And I have picked it up, and now we are entering the year of quantum. 2025 is recognized by UN and UNESCO to celebrate quantum progresses, quantum science and technology. And that to me is obviously a very exciting time to reflect about how the implications on the economy and our life in general is as we move forward with these technologies.
So you touch a lot of very big topics, and probably I would say even my audience that is quite used to get this kind of discussions, but they have a lot of implications, a lot of nuances, a lot of layers. So let's look first, and of course what you just mentioned opened a lot of doors, because since the time you wrote that book, and now you have as well 2 new books coming, we have AI becoming mainstream and quantum computing getting mainstream as well. But there's a lot of sub-layers. So I would like just, if you could explain for our audience, and I think for people listening to us, in a more simple way, and you touched a bit there, but I would like just the concepts for people listening to us. So as a philosopher, you have like the humanistic part and the capitalism, the way you look at humane, that you mentioned in a slightly different way. And then we have the quantum, and of course we can look at quantum mechanics, we can look at quantum computing, and now we have AI in the middle. So let's go by definitions that you have this, because your books have fantastic titles, but I want to look at this. So the quantum economy. Okay, let's look at this because this is one of the titles of your book, but I think it synthesizes a lot of the things you're doing and mixing quantum computing, quantum mechanics, and economy, and a lot of your humanistic approach.
Yeah.
Let's start with that definition.
Yeah, sure. No need to play with that. So first of all, I think the economy is the operating system of our society. So that it means that if the economy is not functioning, it's hard to build some kind of social economy or some kind of ecological economy. Because if there is nothing to divide or invest in new technologies, then we have other issues. People stop, putting in the effort, stop striving for progress, and it becomes more in a sense of a fight for survival as in comparison to exploiting the potential of technology and also the human capacities. So the economy to me is the operating system, and the operating system operates on two parameters. One is the technological progress, and one is the effort or creativity that human beings bake into it. So now we have obviously the rise of AI, and I think you kind of sort of leap forward to the usage of quantum computers. Although I invested in that space and are hopeful to progress in quantum technology, there is no clear evidence that quantum computers will do a lot of things that conventional computers cannot yet do. If you look at how algorithms have been optimized and how computation now have progressed through new chips and capacities. So I wouldn't say that there is an evident clear path. There are a lot of potential that we can get into and a lot of fields that are very, very impactful when it comes to the economics of it. But I think it's not that AI and quantum is something different. What I see now, and in particular in 2025, what we will see is that we will see hybrid computers, where quantum algorithms are run on hybrid computers in the cloud, where we have cloud solutions that optimize different scenarios. What we will see is that quantum will be the driver of AI. So we will move from AI to a quote-unquote artificial intelligence on steroids, which would be quantum AI. So there is not a component here that distinguishes the two. It's more about how to use the algorithm and the capacities of some new computational source or power, if you like, if the progress of error correction and the progress of building quantum computers will proceed. But we are still quite a bit away of having stable quantum computers that can do a lot of these things. But again, here, once the progress might get a lot faster. So I think, they were looking at a complexity of the things being more baked together, more of hybrid solutions. And we're looking at, if we're going to use quantum technology, we are looking at various applications, software and hardware. Obviously, the quantum computer being the terminology that most people are familiar with, but quantum technology as such is much broader than simply, having a stable quantum computer that could do computation way beyond any binary computer that we are familiar with today. So I think this is all interrelated. And when I say the quantum economy as a terminology, it is more about having that philosophical understanding of quantum physics. So as you might be aware of, there is a lot of things that we can build on top of this defined foundational physics, quantum physics. But there is an incompleteness to the quantum theory through quantum physics that is not compatible with how we perceive reality. So in the very, very small, there is a challenge where things manifest themselves in reality. And even today, quantum physicists learn about the Copenhagen interpretation, where in quantum physics you have some kind of observer that observed the collapse of the wave function that manifests into a status. But there is very little to say about this observer, and we don't know what consciousness is. So there is still very many things that, or very foundational problems, I would say, with quantum physics that is yet to be solved. And therefore, if there is a new, more fundamental physics or some part where you can unite general relativity and quantum theory, I have no idea. There have been many speculations about this. So that is why I thought, quantum is the fundamental way of how we build reality or build the world as we see it. And even Richard Feynman referred to this when he said, if we're going to build a simulation, a matrix, it has to be done quantum physically. And therefore, to me, looking at the economy as the operating system, I would use quantum as the terminology of the foundational philosophical and scientific foundation for the thinking about the economy. So that was the basic, the path that I took of choosing the term to have that very dynamism that we talked about at the beginning, as capitalism not being a system that you can apply or replace by another system, but being a path, a dynamic way of running that operating system. So you would look at it as a computer, the world as a computer, and you have a foundation, a hardware, and then on top of that, you build the operating system. And the operating system is never perfect, so you have to patch the operating system. So you upgrade capitalism towards a means. And that means is the very essence of, us as individuals, as a species, as human beings. What do we want to live? How do we want to live? What do we want to achieve? And that is where that mensch or that human aspect comes into play. To say that if we can, theoretically speaking, build everything we can speak out or think about, which is in theory possible, if everything is a part of a physical reality that we could rebuild, then the question does not become if it is achievable. The question then becomes, do we want to build it, with the risk of replacing ourselves or having some kind of consequence that goes beyond our imagination? And that, of course, is where we are today, where we have to think about the implications of the technologies that you are building. AI in relation to quantum is probably one of the greatest things that we have ever achieved. At the same time, it's probably one of the greatest existential risks that we have, that exceeds even a nuclear war and also climate. So that, puts up a paradox and a lot of challenges for us to think about. And I wasn't as clear or complex in those thoughts back in 2018, but it has evolved into the new books where I work very closely with my distinguished colleague Florian Neukert, and think about, the foundational implications and how we can observe and use math and quantum theory to explore this, both from a scientific and a philosophical level. We call it sci-fi, science philosophy. And that is where we are today. So I hope that gives you a broader overview of the term economy, where I obviously borrow quant.
So I want to touch what you just said. I think, yeah. So you touch a very large part, because there's in one end the quantum part of the way you look at the world. Then you touch AI, and as well the way all of these things and all these different dimensions work together. So I have quite a big question, but I think it touches a lot of your thinking. So Geoffrey Hinton, and you touched this right now, Geoffrey Hinton recently referred that we have 10 to 20% chance that AI could drive humanity to extinction within 30 years. And one of your theories, I'm going to make a very complex question, probably that I don't do it very often, but I interview here in this podcast Nick Bostrom. So one of the things you did in 2022 with your distinguished colleague, physicist Florian Neukert and Marcus Lisk, I think I will spell it wrong, and Michael R. Perestein, is that you publish Are Living in a Quantum Simulation, that in a lot of ways looks at the ways Nick Bostrom defined the simulation hypothesis. And I think probably the most famous example of this is probably what Google Content Computing recently managed to achieve, that proves that things that would take hundreds of years to do, they were done in a small fraction of time. So we are in a very paradoxical level, because in one end, as humans, we are achieving, if you would go back 10,000 years ago, probably godlike capacities. But at the same time, like you said, we are questioning and putting in question all our existence. Because first of all, like George Hinton mentioned, and his thesis is that we create kind of digital sentience, the way Nick Bostrom calls these AIs, and I call it as well, that have superhuman capacity and intelligence. So in the end of the day, we create already another species. So my question is, in the nuance of all this philosophical and as well scientific and as well business, because there's a lot of considerations here for the society worldwide. How do you see this? And I'm sure probably see a new book, but because your book title touches this, how can we look at humanity as we speak? Because we are in a biggest paradox. In one end, we question our own humanity. You create a new species of technology evolution that is more powerful than us. And at the same time, we question our own dimension of simulation because you're simulating our own reality. But at the same time, we still have 8 billion people in the planet. And you and me can have this talk here, but I would say 90% of people don't even understand the basics of tech. I'm not talking about the philosophical concepts that we're talking here. So I would like to see how we can actually make a balance on this and how you see these concepts all together. I know there's a big question, but you're big.
No. I think that these are great questions, and let me try to bring this across in an understandable manner by picking it apart. I want to divide your question into two parts. I want to first play with the simulation hypothesis. So Flora and I just recently took that paper you mentioned, and we rewrote that and added some more content to it, and we published a book. This book will be out, published at the World Economic Forum in Davos. It's titled Exmachina. Exmachina, the God experiment, where we try to build God out of the machine. This is found under Exmachina, the book. The book is already finished. And here we look at the simulation hypothesis and we try to test it. And it started in a night in Vienna where I was sitting with 12 quantum physicists. They were having a meeting from a company that I'm involved with. And I challenged them to prove to me through math or science that we are not living in a simulation. And he thought that would be easy. And Florian called me 6 months later and said, I haven't slept in 6 months, Anders. What did you do to me? That should be possible. And it turns out it's very difficult because of these challenges that we have with quantum theory and how we look at the world. So Nick Bostrom in 2003 proposed an argument that contains 3 various scenarios, out of which one holds to be true. One is that we will never reach technological maturity because we will go extinct before we reach this. So along the way, there is some kind of, baked in whatever thing or something happens so that we die before we could build a simulation. The second part is that we as humanity, as a species, we simply stop trying to reach technological maturity. We just simply go bored, or we find something else to do, to sit in awe, or to have some kind of higher meditational state, or some other thing that we do. So we stop producing more technologies. Kind of sort of say, okay, now my iPhone has enough. We are happy with that. We do something else. The first scenario, of course, that is a possibility. But again, if that is a cyclic path, then, how is that come to be, and what does it mean for humanity if there's baked in expiration date of our species? The second part, it's kind of hard to imagine right now that we will stop pushing for progress. And the third argument is that progress is possible. And with that, then there is no borderline. It's just a question of time before we can build a simulation. Right? So this is the argument that Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Nick Bostrom and also philosophers such as David Chalmers has said that there's a high likelihood for us already living in a simulation, because if progress is possible, and the experience that you and I have had over the past 50 years from playing Pong in a two-dimensional game to these virtual glasses that we have today, if that continues, then we are in the most exciting time in human history, it seems, because now we are building a simulation, which is a very, very small likelihood if you look at the whole context of the universe. So if that is true, it is much more likely that we already live in a simulation. And this is the argument. And if millions of people would build simulation that would have simulation within the simulation, and we would be some kind down this simulation chain, then obviously, the likelihood that we are not part of base reality. I think Elon Musk referred to this as 1 in billions that we would live in base reality. So yeah, we could be the first civilization, or we could be the last civilization, or we could be anywhere in the chain of building simulations. What does that change? Well, there are various ways in philosophy, and this is not something new that we think about reality. Plato, the allegory of the cave, how we perceive the world. We had René Descartes, the French philosopher, had a vision, the evil deceiver that would feed our sensory experiences. Or Bishop Berkeley, who talked about subjective idealism, which basically states that what you perceive is real. So that would mean that, all the agents in the matrix perceive their surroundings, therefore the matrix is real. And that is also applied if we put on some virtual worlds today. If you have a reaction about the world, you have some kind of experience, then this world is just as real as any other experience because it gives us something a sensory experience in our mind. So we know that what we see, how we see the world, is not very likely to be how the world is actually out there. And that also, obviously questions if there is a world out there, or if you and I are just agents in a game played by some 14-year-old that have simulated some kind of, Newtonian physics to walk around and do things or whatever. So that is the simulation part. And that there are, theories against that, theories pro that. And we wrote a book about this, trying to find observations or arguments against the simulation hypothesis. And the only thing that we could come up with was that if you build a simulation within a simulation within a simulation ad infinitum, eventually the entropy of the universe would then come to make the base computer come to an halt, given that there is no outside intervention in that computer, because the computers in the computers would probably have the same physical boundaries as the computer above. So that would make that the entropy of universe, as long as we cannot manipulate or reverse entropy, then that would be the criteria for the argument that there would be some kind of halt, which could be an implosion of some kind of Big Bang or respark another universe or whatever. So these were things that we talked about in that book. Now comes the other part that you mentioned, and you said it was a complex question, so please excuse me for my long dance. I love it. Into this world. The other part of your question goes into the progress of artificial intelligence towards artificial general intelligence and superintelligence, one of Nick Bostrom's books, and where you refer to Geoffrey Hinton and also the recent work on AI and the Nobel Prizes and everything that we are discussing around the realm of entering an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, basically an artificial intelligence that does everything like the totality of all human beings, just faster and better. And once that point is, achieved, it will just skyrocket into some kind of, non-predictable state. It's one of the arguments. And this is related to the second book that will be out on April 29th. It is already on Amazon. It's titled The Singularity Paradox, Bridging the Gap Between Humanity and AI. And here we look at exactly that. You see that what will happen when we merge with technology or when we strive to build consciousness. So we look at physics and what does it mean to be alive, and we tackle various aspects of quantum physics to look at the world. And what we argue in that book, and we introduce what we call AHI, artificial human intelligence. So we argue that as long as there is a potentiality to ask one more question, to use a reference to Asimov, as long as there is one more question to be asked, as long as there is a person that could sit and talk into the computer and have an experience of that conversation, as long as there is self-perception, then there is agency, right? And that is that, so we need to have that aspect. It's also a bit romantic to say that we are not just computational entities. So this is the argument that we need to create some kind of artificial human intelligence where we enhance our intelligence by a superintelligence, but remain in the sense of remain the aspect that we do not explain, namely what it means to be a human being. Because the argument goes that if we could explain everything, If you build a brain and you have every neuron how the interconnections play and how they work, do we then have a mind? Do we then have consciousness? What sparks the magic of the arising of a thought? Where does it come from? When we say we think, we don't think. We think about thoughts. We think about things that have already happened, have been processed by our wet, fluffy, highly energy efficient computer that is maybe not so good for storage, but has a lot of other capabilities. If that is a quantum computer, which is also theories that Roger Penrose has talked a lot about, we're talking about microtubule and quantum phenomena in our brain, then we are looking at potentialities of rebuilding everything. And if we hack biology and chemistry and we could rebuild the totality of what it means to be a human, then we could build humanoids that are identical to you and I, which means that we could never know for sure if this entity would then be conscious, and we had a lot of philosophical complexities. If we would rebuild Anders and Dinis, would it be the same person, and so on and so forth. But the argument that we follow is that we need to have that non-answered question. Progress must be possible, because otherwise everything is a computation, coming back to then probably could be in a simulation. Everything is a computer, and then it becomes irrelevant, obviously, to that extent that we are creating a computer and we take up that magic of what it means to be a human being. So we argue that, or we introduce the concept of an AHI, an artificial human intelligence, where we say that we should know how to build conscious robots and entities, but as long as we know that they're not identical to human beings and a mensch, then there is a chance for us to have some kind of agency. So it's a bit romantic also around the essence of what it means to be a human. But again, here I have gone down the rabbit hole and thought about all kinds of various schools and practices on what consciousness is, be it the panpsychist rule, be it that consciousness is foundational, and so on and so forth. We could talk for hours about these topics. But in short, the Singularity Paradox tackle the paradoxes of this time that we are in and in relation to technology. And let me round that off with a quote from one of the philosophers that tackled the paradox. And it was the Danish philosopher, existentialist philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard, who said that a thinker without a paradox is like a lover without passion, a mediocre mediocrity. So I think we need the paradoxes. We need those non-solvable states and those potential states to move on. If everything becomes static, our species will become a homostasis, and that is basically a dead system, and that will be the end of humanity. So if those are the 10 to 20% that you refer to, then our challenge is to avoid those and to leave something to the unknown, because as long as there's a potential for unknown, there's a potential for progress, and therefore also life and human life that can experience it. So that's unpacking your multiple dimensional questions and relating it to our publications that are coming.
And I love this, but there's a lot of there. And I think special for people listening to us, I always like to, as a father, as a thinker, and as a thought leader, and as an entrepreneur, I think, and this is my next question is, and I want to come back to your other book, because probably I want to adapt the question to your other book, The Viking Code, The Art of and Science of Norwegian Success. So I have a fascination for the Vikings. Of course, they are the positive and negatives, and you are a descendant of one of them. I'm as well a descendant of the Portuguese, let's say, I would say the first, one of the first global empires, and the Vikings were actually before that. So you dived in the art and science of the culture, which is your native culture. But the challenge we're facing, and this is my question, is how can we look at all of these narratives, and especially what you said, and keep a balance? Because most of the philosophers in history, of course, from Aristotle, you mentioned Plato, you mentioned Kierkegaard, and a lot of these big ones, what they try to do is create narrative for defining what it means to be human. So at the moment, of course, the question is still not answered. And of course, you can take it in one direction or the other, because you can be more on the right side or the left side of at least politics. But as humans, our probably division is how we create an art and science of living. and how we bring this to a culture that has some kind of, I would say, some kind of positive, non-nihilistic, and as well non-destructive level, which is the humanistic part of your books and as well of your narrative. So touching again on this book, The Viking Code, The Art and Science of Norwegian Success, and on these big questions that we're facing right now. And I know that in this book on the Viking Code, you reveal how Norwegian performance athletes and other successful figures use great cultural values to achieve outsized influence in the world stage, which I love as well, because in the end of the day, most of the empires and all the things we discuss here that philosophers build was, okay, who has the intelligence will control the narrative and control actual civilization. So the question is, at the moment, we created machines, coming back to AI, more powerful than us. And definitely, well, Sam Altman, a couple of days ago, and he's been repeating this for months, said already that he achieved AGI and he's on the roadmap to super intelligence. So, and we know as well, like you said, we can create human AI intelligence. If you look at the narrative of science fiction, sorry, it's going to be another big question, but I think with you, every question has to be big. So if you look at the narratives of science fiction, and I'm of course still bringing your book, The Viking Code, as a basis. I love that because the art of science of Norwegian success. So if we look at the narratives of science fiction and you touch a human kind of artificial intelligence or the artificial intelligence, so you can actually build both. And of course, we'll have just one narrative. If you look at films like The Creator, we have multiple different iterations of machines. We'll have probably some super advanced machines. And for instance, I give you two examples. In our own AI division that I've been building, we create 2 AI agents that went rogue. And in a very small scale, but they start questioning us. And they were pure LLMs. I'm not even talking anything with the AGI capacity that you can have, or at least with some of the GPU capacity you can put in some of these LLM models. So the question for you is, bear in mind the capacity of technology. And of course, I'm not even talking quantum computing, because Google just proved that you can go into quantum computing capacity. So we are really in a massive epicenter of radical advanced technologies that are in a lot of ways are alien intelligence in some ways, because it's an intelligence that can scale human in multiple hundreds of thousands of millions of ways. And for us as well, as we speak, and I did an algorithm in Google, not using, but using AIs, that I was a bit shocked that, for instance, if you look purely at the number of AI agents that we have already, as we speak, we're talking around 3 billion AI agents. And by 2050, we might achieve 100 billion to potential trillions. So my question to you is, how we keep this art and science and the ground situation, and that's part of your book in a lot of ways, but at the same time, we don't lose control. Because for us, even in a simulation, in a way, of course, the people or the entities that will be in a simulation, if you go back to Nick Bostrom, is like for us as if we are the humans and we go and destroy an entire bee colony or ant colony. In the end, they will destroy it anyway, because you're doing buildings and so forth. So this dimension doesn't matter for us, because we are another level of intelligence. So how do you see this without going to nihilistic approach? I think that's the first question. And keeping it down to earth. Bear in mind that you are as well a father and as well an entrepreneur, quite successful.
Yeah, I'll round off the complex part with the relationship to that. So one of the findings from Google was also an argument for what is called the multi-world interpretation by Hugh Everett. Basically, a different approach to quantum physics, where every scenario manifests itself, but every possible scenario could branch out in different branches, right? So there are billions or millions of Anderses living in different states that have taken a left turn instead of a right, or something happened and did not happen, and so on and so forth. So that is a completely different theory. And one of the strong proponents here is Sean Carroll, who has spoken at length about the multi-world interpretation. And David Deutsch, that I have had a privilege to talk to and is one of my big inspirational sources, is also one that has thought a lot about that, because he argues, of course, that the other theories in quantum physics is not possible. But then again, it seems to have some kind of significance. To me, life is a wonderful journey to nowhere. No one can take away that experience that I have here sitting talking to you. So to me, that experience is very real. So everything else becomes, quote unquote, irrelevant. I don't need a solid ground to stand on because I like this. If this is a simulation, I like my simulation. It's pretty cool to be alive, right? So, and this is where I can kind of sort of leapfrog into the Viking Code. For people that are interested, it's found under the Viking-code.com. And this book is very simple in comparison to the other books that we talked about earlier. Here it's about living a life where you fill your life intrinsically motivated in order to live a fulfilled life. So you kind of sort of take back the agency, talked about being a father and so on. So what I did here was that I looked at recent success in sports from my home country, Norway. And for those who are familiar, Norway used to be really good in sports that has a lot to do with skiing in snow in winter because they have snow. And that's a good argument for becoming good at skiing, right? But all of a sudden, Norway had produced with 5.5 million people some of the greatest athletes within soccer, tennis, golf. We have the two best beach volleyball players of the world, runners. We had triathletes, all of these gigantic global sports that everyone else used to do and play at length and in a volume that is not comparable to the couple of athletes that do it in Norway. And all of a sudden, they are at the pinnacle of these disciplines. And I thought, what happened to my home country that is not seen as a high-performing culture? So I got very curious about that, if there's some kind of magic behind it. And I dug into that with a colleague that has worked with a lot of the Olympia athletes. And we talked about training methodologies and all of that. And by doing that, I discovered that they were not only the best at what they do, they were also the most liked. They were liked by referees and competitors alike. Even if they do individual sports, they had a very strong sense of collectivism, of team play. And that to me was magical, because how can you build a individual performance culture that is rooted in values and a sense of collectivism? And that was the narrative of the book, how to build a high-performance culture that is rooted in values. And I argue in this book that the results that they have achieved is an outcome of a process and not based only on the goal. So envision running the marathon. There is a close out of the game, or you end the line of the marathon. But the quality of the marathon lies in your next step. So the input of what you do, how you live an intrinsically motivated life, how you are actively shaping your life, is the base of your output of the results you achieve. And this is also coming back to a world where we now can compare ourselves to everyone around us. If you win the Olympic gold medal, there is always someone on social media, probably with you as a friend, that you compare yourself to that has won 5 Olympic gold medals, and you feel miserable if that is your only criteria in life, how to live a purposeful life. So to me, it's not the search of meaning or search of purpose, but it's the active art of giving meaning to life. In the book, I write about this, about how to, unite and you could always say, at the same time, promote individualism and collectivism, right? And I can only have this conversation in relationship to another human being, to you. So I am because you are, right? And this interdependence is a dance that we have. So instead of solely having the declaration of independence, where it's about me first and above everyone else, we commit also to a declaration of interdependence, where we are performing in a relationship to other human beings. So this book is about sports. It's about how, to create this active culture. And it also, in the second part of the book, is very practical on how to apply this Viking Code to education, politics, and business. And it is very relatable today in business, because in sports you see it, in team sports in particular, because everyone has access to the same scientific progress, the variables, the measurements, and everything. Everything is now data. So the team that has team play and can have a culture or team spirit, or have the sum of its parts rise above what they could achieve otherwise, they win. And that is the essence of collectivism. So this model is based on the culture of Norway that was always like that. Coming back to the Vikings, everyone had to participate and everyone had to do different things. I grew up in a small village. I had to do biathlon, cross-country skiing, and soccer, because if I didn't show up for my other guys, they wouldn't come to me in practice. So I had to, in order to have a team to play with, I had to support the other ones. And this is the essence of that collective journey, to understand that if you uplift others and everyone around you is playing at the higher level, and you have an aspiration for yourself to grow, you will grow more if everyone around you is better. That's why you also in business, you surround yourself with people that are better than you. So it becomes kind of sort of like coming back to technology, a reinforcement learning model, if you like, because you put in for the collective and you serve the community or the collective, the team, and the team rises and you can rise even more. And that is the dynamism of progress. And this then, of course, leads to results. And I write in the book about one thing, maybe that could be mentioned. I write about micro-ambitious, to be micro-ambitious, micro-ambitions. So, yeah, we should have goals and visions, but most of us will not end up building rockets or winning Nobel Prizes or Olympic gold medals. Still, we can live a very active and fulfilled life if we are cautious about what we experience when we learn something. So you put a micro ambition in the day, tomorrow, today, the day after tomorrow. And when you achieve that, you experience the magic of learning, the magic of progress. And this is the path that is how I, in the Viking Code, redefine success. So coming back to my personal career, I used to be a professional athlete. I had built companies. From an outside world, people would say, "Whoa, Anders is successful. This is good." I never felt success. And today I talk to you and I feel highly successful because I get to get up every morning and learn. I get to experience my own experience. I get to experience the beauty of progress. So I'm not striving on seeking a finite purpose in life. I am putting purpose to my life and therefore living an active life. This is this magical word that they have in Germany called Lebendigkeit. And this Lebendigkeit represents the vitality of life, what it means to be alive. And this is in a world where we are now reacting to tasks and social media and getting sucked into everything. We are just functioning, taking back that sense of agency that we are shaping and creating our own lives. I think that is very, very important. And therefore, the Viking Code is a book about Lebendigkeit, about the vitality of life. And it's a very easy read in comparison to the other books. But I think if you understand the philosophical foundation of it, it is a very important book in a world today where we are walking around trying to know everything and to be important and to have all answers. And, very often I meet people and I see that there are lights on. They are somehow here, but I ask myself, are there someone home to perceive those lights? Is this a philosophical zombie walking around, or is this human being actually present? So I think this is a very interesting book in terms of, experience and coping with our time today.
Amazing. And I love how you went from a very advanced technological, philosophical quantum concepts coming back to the down to earth. And I love the micro success. I think probably everyone should touch that, and I think we put the links to all your books, to all your amazing articles. There's a lot of websites and so forth. So I know I passed already 1 hour, so I still have a couple of questions, and I'll be just respectful of your time, at least for 2 or 3 more. So one of the questions I have here, so you are as well a successful entrepreneur. Like you mentioned before, you sold already some business, you are an investor, and you are with the Njordis group focused on scaling deep tech companies for positive progress for humanity. So tell us about this part of your business and how you bring all the different things of your philosophy into your business, and especially how it works and how people can know more about it.
Yeah. So Njordis, I set up together with my business partner some years ago that we wanted to structure a lot of the activities that I do. Because as I said in the beginning, to me, philosophy is a thinking practice. I wanted to see my thoughts and reflections manifest in projects. And I didn't want to build one company for myself. I wanted to be a part of companies where I can learn something. I got very inspired by a colleague from Norway who's also an investor. He founded one of the leading educational companies in the world, Kahoot. And Johan Brandt told me that his investment strategy is ROL as a comparison to ROI. ROL meaning return on learning. And I picked that up, and I like that. And I try to invest in companies and get involved with companies where I think I can contribute with my network and experience, but also where I can learn something. So the learning part of getting involved in an organization is very important to me, to have that dynamism, where I truly think that I could, either through bringing an investor and helping in companies raise money, or through my network or my strategical background, how I can support a company on scaling. And I get involved with things that I enjoy, and also things that I think are important for humanity, that can have an impact, positively so, on our species. So, of course, I have some things that I get invested in and like, because I like the mere part of that entrepreneur, or the spirit, or the idea. And then I have things that are more fundamental towards progress for humanity, be it in health tech. You mentioned quantum and things that are related to AI to optimize various things. We are building a logistic case right now that has a huge impact on a lot of transportation, that could save a lot of CO2 and has a very good impact, both economically and, call it, logically. So these are things that I get involved with. With Njordis, we get in either with investors together, or we help raise larger rounds. We invest in a particular range, and we also do some advisory work in an organization where we can get in with our partners to support on various strategical work in early stages of the organization. So yeah, those are things that we spend more and more time with, and I really also enjoy, because it has a strong relationship to my research for books and articles and things that I work on when I travel. And I'm privileged to speak at a lot of conferences where I meet a lot of people and get a lot of insights from experts in various fields. So to me, that, absolute curiosity to learn everything is still a driver, coming back to my childhood. And today I try to do that also with a sense of business in terms of investment and in getting involved with the companies. So that's the Njordis group in a nutshell. And yeah, we are happy with that, how that is also evolving. And we have great plans for the next years with the organization. It's something that I spend a lot of time today on building and shaping as well. So it's a big part of my daily chores to be in that particular field of supporting tech companies.
So on the continuation of this, and part of your achievements is that you are the initiator of numerous projects as the Quantum Economic Alliance, and as well the founding partner and investor at the Global Institute for Leadership and Technology. And I didn't mention that in my intro, but as well, you've been involved as well in a lot of things related, for instance, as a board member and investor at the Global Blockchain Initiative, GBI. So tell us a bit about these different things, and probably the ones that are more dear to you, because there's quite a list of them that you put, of course, in notes.
Some of the things that I get involved, I support organizations, fields that are new emerging. I want to dig in, Obviously, I was curious about blockchain as an infrastructure technology. I wanted to understand, the asset structures of Bitcoin and business use cases. What can you do with that technology? And is there something substantial to all these tokens and meme coins and whatever? So I was very curious about this development. So I've been working on that a little bit. As for the Global Institute of Leadership Technology, that is run by my business partner. I own the company, co-owner of it, but that's an educational company where I do very little work. Some of the clients are around my network. What we do there is that we put some of my philosophical thinking into educational programs and work with larger corporates on these type of topics, be it in the field of AI, be it in the field of leadership, or also in the field of ecology. So that's the organization. And with the quantum economy, that has basically evolved around the book. And we are gathering the community and trying to be a supporter of various initiatives. It's not a big business model around that. It's basically the interests that I have in the field of quantum technology and the philosophical notion to that. And this is where I also spent a lot of time with my colleague who is one of the members of the board of Terra Quantum, Flora Neukert, my co-author, and we do a lot of these exchanges on ideas and thoughts on how quantum tech and how the quantum field is evolving. So it's my way to be tightly involved, close with the development from these research centers and the various organizations. So I also spend some time facilitating for events and gathering the community to be a part of that dialogue and to get the latest updates and understanding of various papers and progress in the technology. So I'm very curious about, how this will evolve and who will be the leaders, what will be the business models. So I try to stay not at the spear front of it maybe, but at least, amongst the people that get an information on updates at an early stage. And this is my way through the quantum economy to build and shape that.
Well, definitely you are much more ahead than the beginning. So I have, of course, I know that we have a limitation, but one big question, probably there will be the last big one because I want to respect your time. So on the new book, and you touched some of this, but I want to deep dive. So Exmachina, the God Experiment. You touch all the things that we mentioned in the interview so far, but your subtitle is The God Experiment. So I want to touch that because we touch indirectly in that, but I know that is a big one. But I'm particularly interested because in the end of the day, more than I think we're playing gods. Of course, Noah Harari the book as well, Odeos. And of course, you're touching all of these different things here. So one of the things, and this is part of your website and the part of the book, of course, the book is still not public, but you can already order it. And we get all the different things. We'll put all the links here. But you touch a lot of different things, especially in the focus of experimental approach. And you analyze, we might uncover evidence about the nature of our reality. And of course, the computational boundaries, and I'm quoting right now from the book as well. Although computational boundaries are still to be overcome, through observations and analysis of the simulation theories, open new perspectives on the profound questions of existence, while acknowledging the limits of the current scientific knowledge. So I think my question is not to repeat what we said, and I think I think people can listen to this multiple times. There's a lot of pearls of wisdom here, but a lot of question marks for everyone. So we are definitely in this stage where we are playing gods with ourselves, first of all, because we're re-engineering ourselves. And you touched before that you can create a human AI intelligence or some kind of augmented part of what means to be human. And at the same time, we're playing the concept of God. Of course, this is very scientific, but as well, very probably for the more religious people, very tricky. But how do you see this compelling sense of urgency and sense of disruption? And as well, a bit tell us about the book as well, because you touched about it, but I want to go a bit more deep on the book because you're going to launch it in January in Davos.
No, I mean, first of all, I have great respect for various beliefs. I think having something to believe in, whatever God, whatever that might be, is important to very many people because coping with a non-solid reality is very frustrating if you start to think about infinities and ponder, the various challenges that we have. So I think in very many essence, I have a slight challenge with religion. Categorizing beliefs seem to be something that has not been very beneficial for humanity. But again, the ceremonies, going to the church, listening to that commune, that community spirit, and there's a lot of wisdom in the ethics and the writings and so on and so forth, right? Do I need a God? I do. I am open. I consider myself an agnostic atheist. If everyone would agree on one, if monotheism is a thing and there's one God, just agree on one and present him to me, and I'm open to reflect and understand, right? Do I need it? No, I don't. And therefore, I am in the sense of having that philosophical foundation, I am very, very open to that there is not things that we cannot explain. And this is what we ponder in the book. And we're saying that, if we want to have bliss, divinity, and immortality, created by technology, basically we are on the path to creating gods, Deus ex machina. And, if we are a part of a simulation, a quantum simulation, then there has to be something outside of that, some kind of base computer that has a base computer, and there has to be like an initial state, and we get into that, how can something evolve out of nothing, and what remains of us if we could figure out every single atom and every single function and every single biological subparticle of our body, and we would know everything, we would hack biology, what would that mean? What would remain of us as a human species? Is there some kind of collective higher consciousness that is non-computational, that is even non-physical? How could that manifest itself? So this book takes on these questions, and you're very right that even though there hasn't been a lot of progress in that field, in figuring out the answers, the notion of, and the volume of debate and the notion of interest and curiosity and investment into trying to figure it out has definitely increased exponentially. And we are now wiring up our brains. We are, as I said, hacking biology and chemistry. And that will speed up, with advanced algorithms. The periodic system today has, 118, 119 elements, and it will probably go up to 130, 140 because AI on algorithms that are run on supercomputers will figure out new substances and construction, and that again will lead to advancements and so on and so forth. So the book is in that sense titled The God Experiment, that we are trying to create everything, the understanding. So right from if we remove, there are also a lot of quotable reflections on how time and space had a good ride, and the collapse of space and time. Envisioned creating your own dad. What would that mean, right? So this is the bandwidth of reflections if you start to look into all the absurdities and the strangeness that we encounter. And therefore, I think the God Experiment, to me, kind of sort of manifests or represents the path that we are on. We want to create the creator. And therefore, in the book, we write about moving from the divine creationalism to humane creationism. So from the divine path of creation, we are now taking creation into our own hands and manipulating our own reality to that extent that we are rebuilding everything that we can imagine. And that is in essence the path toward building that simulation. And all the atoms in our universe, could, with a computer that is, a quantum computer with that power, could simulate all the particles and atoms in our universe. But the challenge is, as we talked about before, if that happens, ad infinitum, there are 8 billion universes, eventually the entropy in the universe would come to a halt. If there is no godly hand in play or some external intervention. So I think the subtitle of the book, to many that might be a challenge if they are strongly tied to a belief, a religious system, if they are strong to belief. It's not at all a disrespect of that. As I said, I have huge and great respect for belief. I have a challenge with religions in my own personal view, but I'm very agnostic about it because I at least can, with a very strong confidence, say that I have no idea what the final answer is to these great questions of the foundation of our reality. But I have a great privilege to sit in and listen to all these people that are so much smarter than I am, so that I can reflect on various views, be it from the spiritual, from the people that are believers that consciousness is foundational, from the believers that math is foundational, from the believers that are tied to some kind of panpsychist belief system that everything has some kind of consciousness. All of these various views, ranging also from the multi-world interpretation all the way to the simulation hypothesis. I have the great privilege, and I'm very thankful for that, having met a lot of these people, listened to these people, to have my own views. And some days I'm more leaning towards one argument, and some other days I go down the next rabbit hole, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So that's why Florian and I chose also to have the God Experiment as the subtitle of the book, the God out of the machine, where we look at if there is a simulation, then it's done by the foundational physics that we know today, which is quantum physics. And if the achievement is, then basically we are taking creation into our own hand. And then we are not only playing gods, but we are, building a godlike machine. And therefore, this title of the book.
Oh, so I completely subscribe, and there's a lot of things. So one last question, and the question is based on your essay, God's Faust Leadership, which I love. And it's actually something that I think a lot. Okay, as we build AI, all of us are building with our data, and you touched as well, we're building already something more advanced that it has a power godlike, independent of the beliefs. But I think the myth of Faust is very important for the present world, because in the end of the day, humans always did a pact to achieve something. And in your fantastic essay, you touched that this pact is life in a lot of ways. But you finish with, and of course, I'm sure you'll explain more, but this humanity means activation. And as well, I like what you said, that I think it's very important when you touch about technology and AI, and as well, for us as CEOs, you have to fire people, managing people, and you have to make decisions. As even humans, we sometimes even divorce the people we love, or used to love. So one of the things you said here is this humanity means activation, from which we are able to face our own demons and influence our own lives positively. So I want to touch this, and I think it's probably what I love about your work is that you can be super deep, but it can be very human. And this part of humanity is more important than ever. And it's one of the things that I'm trying to myself reflect. How can we keep this humanity in the middle of the competition and the fact with Faustus? Because in a company, we need somehow not to compete in a bad way, but in some cases, there are a lot of people that compete, depends on the cultures. So I want to touch about this essay as my last question to you. How do you handle with the Faust pact? That is the pact with the devil. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, Faust, Goethe writes about that, and it brings us back to that, debate about, at the beginning there was light. No. At the beginning there was an action, die Tat, die Handlung in German, and that die Tat, am Anfang war die Tat. And that is the activation, and that is, to me, the leadership part of that is, yet you would in English you would say action hero, but an action hero is about the action. In German, you have a word that is described as a Handlung. That's an activational activity and not an action activity. And die Tat, etwas zu tun, that what you're doing, a doing. So you're also a doing hero, but it makes very little sense. These are one of the magical words that you have in the German language that does not really get represented in the English language. And I had a challenge translating it into English. I wrote the article initially in German about leadership, and I picked apart Goethe's Faust. And I think the takeaway is basically that, at the beginning, there wasn't light, there was an action, there was an activity, and something happened. And that is, how can we have active agents? How can we have leaders that take action and anticipate future scenarios and build futures? Future is to me a verb, to future. It is something we do. Of course, you could sit back and something will happen, but we are in a situation where we can actively, maybe like no human species or no generation before, can we influence at least our own reality. We have access to amazing technology, we have resources, and therefore, that essence of the activation becomes so important. So I think, Faust is a very good representative for leadership, and it's something that I wrote a couple of years ago in German. But I think also when you're on that topic, that it also referred back to another part that I also have an article on, but also is baked into the books now. It's what I call the final narcissistic injury, and referring to Freudian narcissistic wounds or narcissistic injuries. So the first one you had was obviously Copernicus. You discover that we do not live at the center of a universe, a finite universe, but we are some kind of insignificant planet at the outskirts of an infinite universe. And that was the first injury. The second was obviously Charles Darwin, who, discovered that we are part of some kind of evolutionary chain, and we are not like God-made creatures, but we're part of some animalistic evolutionary chain. And that was the second one, which gave birth to a lot of progress in science and technology, leading up to Freud's third injury, where the discovery of self and the Freudian psychology, where, the free will, and the free is something and the will wants something, that again drove the progress in neuroscience. I think we are now at some kind of final narcissistic injury, where the risk that we have is that we merge with technology and we rebuild everything, but somewhere along the way, we lose the agency, the reflection of what it means. So we could have the same conversation, but no one would perceive it. So you would kind of sort of go into the matrix and, you know, there is no one to observe it. So we would have the conversation going on, but there is no consciousness. It kind of sort of like Narcissus who stares into the water, and there's the reflection of this beauty, and the picture of the beauty is still there, but there is no one home to perceive it, like the perfect humanoid zombie. And that is the risk, the final narcissistic injury. So before we end up, I think, you know, every one of us should be cautious about that. So whoever is going to be the last one who is going to jump into the simulation, be sure to leave the lights on, because it's pretty cool to experience life.
Wow, that's a great way to wrap up this 1 hour and a half plus. So it's been an honor. And I think probably I will ask for a take two where it can go more deep, but I probably will go and frame a lot of the concept, because today we went very deep and there's big questions. But I think for people listening to us, we're going to put the links to all your fantastic essays, books, and as well websites. There's a lot of things in German and in English, and you're quite generous with the quantity of text available. I would suggest people listening to, like I have this fun research. There's a lot of great concepts here. Get the books as well. I think all the books are fantastic, and I'm looking forward to read more. The final one that gets in January. And Anders, thank you for all your inspiration, for all the great work and ideas that you put to the world, and provocation that you bring in a very healthy way. Thank you so much.